2, 1 now.
Hi and welcome to this meeting of Greater Manchester Police, Fire and Crime Panel. As people know, we are still meeting virtually due to the pandemic, but I'll start off with apologies. Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Graham Whittam from Trafford Council, Councillor David Jones from Bury Council, Caroline Wilkins, Lead Chief Exec, Police, Fire and Crime, and also Chris Heighton, Officer from Rochdale Council. Just before we move on to business, Chair, if I could just remind members, as you've mentioned, this is a live meeting of the Police, Fire and Crime Panel, and if all microphones could be muted unless the member is invited to speak via the Chair. On the Chair's invitation to speak, microphones should be turned on and background blurred. And I'll hand you back over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And we are joined by Councillor Freeman from Trafford, representing Graham. As I think most of us heard last Friday, there was a tragic event in London with the death of a serving police officer, Matt Patana, and I think it would be appropriate for us to recognise the service that all police give, particularly when they give the ultimate sacrifice of giving their life. So I'd like to pause for a minute's silence in memory of Matt. Thank you, members. Okay, moving on then, we've got item 4 on the agenda, which are the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of July. First, are people happy they are a correct record? I'm going to do the normal one on here, either by silence or by no notes in the chat area. We'll assume that's a correct record. And then second, is any items people want to raise from those minutes that aren't covered on the agenda? Okay, thank you very much. Those are noted then. Can we move on then to the GM Police and Crime Plan 2019-2020? I was always going to get messed up by that one. And Bev, I'm going to hand straight over to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm really pleased to introduce very briefly, if I may, the second Police and Crime Plan covering the 3-year period. And before I do that, if I may beg your indulgence, Chair, I really just wanted to say briefly what an important contribution both the Fire Service and GMP have played during the course of the pandemic, and that's obviously by no means over. It's not particularly an item on the agenda today, so I just thought in the context of the report, which does reference obviously the unprecedented period that we're in, to say something about what the Fire Service and GMP have been doing, because as well as keeping going their business as usual, fighting fires and fighting crime, they've also respectively played a very significant contribution outside of that in terms of the joint effort being coordinated by the Strategic Coordination Group and by the Mayor's Emergency COVID Committee, which I sit on as well. So the Fire Service has been a major player early on in the coordination of PPE, which members will remember was a significant problem early on in terms of its availability. Fire Service coordinated PPE on the Bury training site and made sure that as far as we could, that was delivered where it should be. They also staffed the Nightingale Hospital which has been stood down now, but for that period it was really important. And they played a major role in the humanitarian cell's activities, making sure that the people who are vulnerable got the deliveries they needed to keep going. The police, of course, have been extremely important in trying to ensure the compliance right throughout in terms of the regulations, but also other tasks as well. They staffed the temporary mortuary that we had to stand up in Trafford Park. So I just wanted really to put that on record, because our police officers, our firefighters, our staff in both the fire service and the police, and of course the senior officers, have played a major part in helping to do the very best we could in terms of our response for our citizens during this pandemic. So moving on, I'll just very briefly introduce the report, if I may. Members had a copy of the text early on with the papers, and yesterday we were able to send you hot off the press the published version with all the graphics and so on. And so I hope you've had a chance to look at that. Starting off, obviously, we've working through really exceptional, unprecedented even challenges, and the report charts some of those early on. But I want to say, and I hope this comes through in the report, this is a story also of success, of resilience, of rising to those challenges, and responding to the needs of our citizens and the wider city region community. Also, I hope this comes across as well. It's a story of partnership. I think that's a major message that I want to make sure we convey. Partnership across the combined authority, the local authorities, police, fire, health, our voluntary organisations. Also, I hope it's evident, a partnership between the police and crime team that myself and the mayor lead, and also the community safety partnerships. It's something that I've been very concerned to strengthen during my time as Deputy Mayor, to make sure that we can make that partnership as strong as possible, that we recognise fully all the important activity that goes on in local districts to support their citizens and to fight crime and so on. So I hope those two messages come across strongly, and that's why towards the end of the report, as I did last year, I wanted to highlight some of the innovation, the activity that your officers and your partners, voluntary organisations as well, in each of your districts, the contributions they're making to the safety and the security and the well-being of their citizens in terms of community safety. A number of challenges are identified. The financial is always there. We've had some technical challenges, which we're going to talk about later on the agenda, in terms of the installation of IOPS, which was very challenging. But however, the potential of that is increasingly being realised and will position Greater Manchester Police very well in terms of improving even further its service. I think it's important as well to notice the complexity of crime and the changing nature of crime. You know, very often we think of crime as happening, you know, in neighbourhoods. It's what individuals do, but actually increasingly our communities are being affected by the impact of serious and organised crime on our communities, and of cyber crime, which again is often internationally and nationally led by criminal gangs. So the discharge of firearms on our streets isn't just the activity of individuals, it's a consequence of the activity of organised criminal gangs, of which we have a significant number across Greater Manchester. Similarly, drugs, county lines, sexual abuse and exploitation and criminal exploitation of children and so on, human trafficking and modern slavery, all of these are the manifestation of the international and national networks of criminal gangs. And it's this impact of that level of activity in our locality that is becoming increasingly prevalent. I wanted to highlight in our response in terms of keeping people safe, some of our priorities. A very significant priority, of course, in terms of improving our services for victims. I wanted particularly to mention domestic abuse, which is a significant issue in Greater Manchester. And it's one that during this period of the pandemic, I was very concerned about, as people were nationally. And again, I think the work that jointly we did with your districts and your domestic abuse leads in each district by standing up very frequent meetings and looking across the districts at what we could do to signal to potential victims who might be, unable to contact services because of the pandemic, to give them routes into services and make sure that as far as we could, despite the constraints, they were able to access services if they were in need. We had the publication of the Augusta report during this period, and that has led, as you know, to standing up of a new Operation Green Jacket to explore further the historic abuse, sexual abuse of children during the period that covered. We've had the establishment of the Violence Reduction Unit, again, which is a very strong focus on victims, as well as reducing violence across our communities. A renewed focus on youth justice and trying to make sure that the young people that come into the system, that we target them early, we intervene early, and we can prevent them being drawn further into crime. Supporting vulnerable women, Greater Manchester is a pioneer in this area, and our Operation Challenger and our approach to complex safeguarding, again, which are really innovatory. In fact, the police minister was here last week hearing about those multi-agency approaches to serious and organised crime and complex safeguarding. The report then identifies highlights in the other two priorities for us: reducing offending and harm, strengthening communities and places. And I'll just pick up a couple of issues later on, because what we also need to do is to improve our services as we go forward, and also know how well we're doing and how well our citizens think we're doing. So you've heard before of our police and community safety survey, which again is innovatory. We're the only area, I think, doing this nationally. Widespread survey, repeated every 3 months, asking people what they think about our community safety services and how safe they feel. And this going forward will give us really important benchmark as to how well we're doing. And then I just want to pick up again the point I made at the beginning, how important it is and has been for me to invest in communities. So £4 million worth of our partnership money has been devolved into the local authority community safety partnerships to develop services locally. At the same time, through the Violence Reduction Unit, we distributed over £3 million there to support the work of the Violence Reduction Unit by enabling localities to set their priorities and to institute local services, along particularly with their voluntary sector partners. And the back end of the report just picks out one or two highlights from every single district, just to show the range and spread of activity. So I think, to me, that partnership between what we're trying to do centrally and what we're trying to do locally and support local communities in developing their approaches is to me one of the most important hallmarks of what we're trying to do. I'll leave it there, Chair, and happy to take any comments, observations, questions.
Thanks for that. I think it's amazing when we look at some of the work that's actually taken place over the last 12 months, and I too would like to recognise the work that the police and fire and other public services have done over the last 6 months in extraordinary times, and still getting on with their normal day job as well, which has been actually extraordinary. I think one of the sections that's in the report is the additional police officers that have come or are coming online within Greater Manchester. And it's worth reminding these are police officers that have been funded by the Precept, which was a commitment that we supported you in to deliver that neighbourhood policing. And it's good to see that they're finally coming through. And this is in addition to the numbers that are being promised by central government. But it's important to point out that we were already on the path to delivering that. And it takes time for that to come through. But it certainly recognises the benefits they're having in those communities. I'm going to start off and go with Councillor Pearce from Stockport. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chair. I I think it's a really good report. It's really good to see the progress being made and against some of the challenges that we've had, especially this year. And I'm really pleased to hear the Deputy Mayor's comments about the value of the Community Safety Fund. I think that's one of our key positives in this, if you like, in that what this enables us to do is have the flexibility to deal with things that are important and happening in the district. So I welcome that you see the value of it, because I'm hoping that that's going to continue for some time to come. And also the plan, as well as the survey, gives us some real material to do some reflection, to move forward and to plan ahead for the future.
Thanks for that, Councillor Pearce. I'm going to Councillor Freeman from Trafford.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the Deputy Mayor for this report. I came quite late to it, only got the papers over the weekend. I think it's a really, really good news story, and I'd just like to talk locally a bit in Trafford, because I think it's important that I've always thought it important we had a very close working relationship with the police, but I'd like you to know, Deputy Mayor, that the current relationship we have with our police commander in Trafford, through our strategic lead for crime and antisocial behaviour, is probably at the best and strongest it has ever been. And we're very lucky in Trafford to have a superintendent called Caroline Hemingway, who is an absolutely no-nonsense superintendent, but very, very valuable, and is very, very well appreciated and liked right across Trafford. So I think the report is very, very good news, and it reflects in the fact that we have a very strong working relationship locally in Trafford with our police commander. Thank you.
I think it's always good to hear positive news stories about the partnerships working on the ground in practice as well as service. That's really reassuring. Majid, who's one of our independent members.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. A couple of quick things. So, as you said, it's been a year of challenges and successes. Really pleased to see the neighbourhood policing strategy being developed, with policing working hand in hand with health. So my other hat on, I'm really pleased and welcoming of that. The only thing I wanted to pick up on that, for a number of years now, because of cuts and stuff, response times and the sort of rhetoric in the communities that, look, we haven't got the resources to tackle low-level crimes, etc., and response times haven't been as good as they could be and stuff. But now, with the investment of additional resources, this new partnership working, and the IOP system as it develops, I hope we can change some of that rhetoric now and see a lot more will be done to support communities with that type of crime. Second thing was, I was really pleased to see the development of the hate crime plan, which the report talks about it being launched in autumn 2020. Sadly, COVID-19, as well as bringing the disease, it's brought out lots of hate crime and stuff, and going forward it's really important that we have a sharp focus on people reporting it, because I know from speaking to people that people have been the victims of hate crime both online and in person, but have not reported it. But it's important that this plan encourages people to report and offers them that confidence and assurance that hate crime is being taken seriously and will be dealt with robustly. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Majid. No, very important points brought up. No one else has indicated. Bev, is there anything you want to add or respond to?
I'd just like to thank those members for those comments. I do really appreciate it. It's good to get the feedback, and I'm obviously glad it's generally positive. I think that in terms of Majid's comment about hate crime, particularly, that is about ready and will come out very shortly. What I hope that will do is enable us to focus a bit more on how we help people to report hate crime when they experience it more readily than they do now. I'm not convinced that all the reporting centres are the best way. I'm not convinced that enough people know about the reporting centres. So that's one thing that we do want to look at. The neighbourhood policing strategy and the impact of the extra police officers is a report later on this agenda, so we'll be able to have a discussion about that. And I just thank Councillor Pearce and Councillor Freeman. It's good to hear that those relationships locally with the police are very good, because actually, you know, most of the issues now that come to the police's door, as I know members of this panel will appreciate, are not issues that police alone can enforce our way out of. They do need that partnership. They do need the integration of local authorities, health, our voluntary sector, particularly, in order to tackle some of the underlying issues more effectively and actually prevent crime happening in the first place. And that really should be our objective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I think, you know, thank you for all the work and commitment you've been putting in over the year as well, because we're quite good at sometimes overlooking the hard work that's actually put in for myself as well. So no, it is appreciated. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 6. So sorry, last to note that report, I think we have done and we've commented on it. What I'd also like to say is that we should be publicising it as well, because there's some great information in there which is helpful to reassure our communities. So I think we're doing what we can on that on an individual basis. I'm going to move on to item 6, which is the IOPS update, and that was certainly something that's occupied a lot of people's time over the last year. We're joined on the phone, I believe, by Rob Potts. We've had a few technical gremlins, but Rob, hopefully you can hear us and join us.
I can, thank you, Chair, and can I offer my apologies again to yourself and the members of this panel for the fact that I am not visible, but I'll do my best with audio. There are 2 short papers in relation to IOPS. If I deal with the update, first of all, please, as the Deputy Mayor has alluded to in the annual report, IOPS has been a significant change for Greater Manchester Police. In terms of the performance of IOPS, Police Works and Control Works continues to be stable, and the programme of enhancements is continuing over the next 18 months, and reports can come back to this panel as requested. The next significant release in Police Works will take place during this autumn, which will be Police Works 2.7, and that involves both a number of fixes to bugs within Police Works, as well as some functional enhancements, probably the most important one being to the search function that exists within IOPS. There is another significant enhancement release, 2.8, which is scheduled for around the end of 2020. And as I say, we're very happy, either Chris or myself, to report back to this panel on that enhancement if required. Are there any questions on the IOPS update before I move into partner access? I
think, Rob, to make it easier, probably best doing it as 2. If we can take both items as 1, and then we can kind of open it up rather than, if that's okay with yourself.
Absolutely, Chair. I will do. Okay. IOPS partner access. Access to Police Works, which is Greater Manchester Police's records management system, is controlled by role-based access, which was only switched on the 23rd of June 2020. But the good news is what that means is we are now able to provide non-GMP employees with access to the reports following vetting and training. We have a number of partnership analysts using Cognos already, which is our data management and information system, as well as some performance staff from the Deputy Mayor's office. As the paper indicates, there's a straightforward procedure in place for partners to request access to IOPS. The applicant requires a Greater Manchester Police District sponsor and either a DPIA or an information sharing agreement, which is similar to the arrangement prior to IOPS. In terms of sort of a sponsor, the performance managers on the districts, the 12 districts across GMP, are the best people to practically assist any partner analysts or similar. But from a sort of a more broader partnership perspective, partners are invited to make contact with the district commander, the superintendent responsible for each district, and they will be able to assist them in making contact with the performance managers and going through this process.
Thanks for that, Rob. I will open it straight up. We've got Councillor Freeman.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, ACC Potts. I think going backwards a few months, the biggest concern was of access to IOPS from community support to staff employed by councils. I'm very pleased to report to you that staff at Trafford, 2 staff have now been trained and have got access, And there's a further wash-up of training which has been promised for later this year, but it's been slightly delayed by COVID. The one issue we have is that from our strategic crime and ASB officer is that we can't access remotely because we need a GMP laptop. So we have to actually go into the station on a daily basis from the town hall. It's only next door, pick up the information and take it back. And I'm just wondering about that sort of relationship with town halls, whether we can find laptops, GMP laptops to be given to such officers so we can access remotely from our own bases. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Freeman. Very happy to take that back to the IOPS team and explore the potential for partners such as Trafford Council to be able to remotely access the information. So, can I can bring it back to this meeting, or I can contact you directly if that's.
Bring it back to the meeting in due course. I think it's something that will affect all the 10 local authorities, and thank you for the continued work on IOPS. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeanette. Did you want to say something on this, or you?
I can help Rob out on this one actually, because in my lead GM role, GMP have been recently in contact with me, and I can confirm, Rob, that you are in the process of trying to roll out Windows 10 and therefore personalised laptops to all council officers. That's a process that is currently in train. I've not got a confirmed date of when that happened, Councillor Freeman, but I can confirm that it is in GMP's plans to do that.
Thank you.
That's always positive. Councillor Emsley from Rochdale.
Just to ask about the analysis and analysts, one of the problems that I think we're going to encounter is that various partners haven't got analysts. Is there any funding available for us, or is there any access to analysts that we can is there any access to analysts that we can facilitate so that we can use the data?
I think, sorry, Chair, if I can respond. I think from a GMP perspective, what I would invite you to do is to make contact with the district superintendent at Rochdale, which is Superintendent Niall Hayden-Pawson, and have a discussion around what products the analysts at Rochdale can provide to support Rochdale Local Authority.
I think that's something that will be taken up, and maybe we should be looking at what information, if Rochdale looking for information, maybe it's something that other boroughs would be looking for, that maybe we could actually do some shared work on it to actually make it easier, because it must be similar information, and maybe that's something we could pick up in the steering group if it's something that we feel it's something worth developing, which could be helpful.
That'd be useful, thank you, Chair.
I'm getting no other indications of people wanting to comment on this one. I mean, I want to thank the amazing amounts of work again that's gone into this over the past 12 months. To say it was a smooth ride would be certainly not true, but I think the benefits that are starting to come through are quite clear. And I know that some of the work that's been done over the last 6 months for remote working in different areas couldn't have been done certainly under the old system, and the investment was needed. And while a difficult start was there, we are starting to see the benefits of it. So thank you for that. I'm not getting any other indications for questions on this one. So I will move on to the next main item, which is the 2020 officer uplift. And again, I'm going back to yourself, Rob.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is an update for panel members in relation to the uplift of 347 additional officers allocated to GMP for this current financial year. I'm going to summarise the paper. In considering where to allocate the additional posts, we primarily considered our established target operating model and the police and crime plan. Neighbourhood policing is at the heart of what we do in Greater Manchester, and we constantly seek to improve our neighbourhood offer. However, we also recognise that neighbourhood policing cannot be delivered in isolation, and for it to work effectively, it requires the support of the whole of Greater Manchester Police, as well as our partners and communities. In terms of neighbourhood policing, very briefly, it is usually regarded as being made up of neighbourhood beat officers, police community support officers, and whilst it is true to say that these are the core roles, they are part of a wider local policing structure made up of several other parts, which include neighbourhood patrol officers, who respond to calls and investigate volume crime, safeguarding officers who work with partners to protect the most vulnerable, investigators in the equivalent of the former CID within policing, and some other supporting functions, particularly intelligence and planning. None of these parts can work without the other, and each impact on one another. So, for example, if there aren't sufficient NPOs available to respond to calls, that means that neighbourhood beat officers are abstracted from their neighbourhood role to support them. And likewise, if the intelligence and planning functions aren't effective, officers are not deployed efficiently and effectively. And if we don't have enough detectives, neighbourhood police officers and NBOs are taken away from their core roles to investigate more serious crime. In addition to local policing, we do have sort of a specialist and corporate departments which provide a supporting role, which again local policing can't function effectively without the operational communications branch and the major incident team are just two examples of that. So members may remember we determined a number of principles earlier on this year on which to base the decision making around the 347. I won't run through every one of them, but just pick some key ones out. One was we would increase the number of neighbourhood beat officers we have across every district in line with the problem solving index. We would remain committed to place-based working. Every ward would have a named police community support officer and neighbourhood beat officer. The number of available neighbourhood police officers would increase and their distribution would be in line with the demand resource model. We would improve our response to vulnerable victims. We would permanently establish the number of required posts in our multi-agency safeguarding hubs. We would permanently establish all essential back office functions, allocating restricted duty officers where possible, therefore allowing neighbourhood police officers to return to their core roles, and the vast majority of the additional officers overall across the force would be allocated to local policing roles. So what you've got in the paper under section 2 is the allocation of certain 365 of the posts, and you will see that 246 are within local policing. If I just give some very brief details on the ones that aren't in local policing, the specialist operations branch posts are posts, new posts within the tactical firearms unit, the tactical vehicle interception unit, and the collision investigation unit, who investigate our fatal and most serious collisions. In terms of the public protection and serious crime division additional posts, these posts have been used to create a new force-wide child sexual exploitation team, which has been created in order to deal with the number and complexity of CSE investigations across Greater Manchester Police. The neighbourhoods confidence and equality posts are in order to drive forward our work on citizens in policing, which are volunteers in policing, special constables, and the volunteer police cadets across Greater Manchester. And the 43 within the organisational learning and workforce development are key posts to ensure that we invest in training both our new recruits coming in significant numbers in order to ensure they are ready for operational deployment, but also training some more specialist skills as well to ensure that all of the parts of the organisation are fully staffed with the appropriately skilled officers and staff. Under section 3, we have a breakdown of the 246 local policing posts across the various districts. I suppose the highlights from this, I would say, are that there are a total of 50 new neighbourhood beat officers, and that each district will receive at least 3 extra neighbourhood beat officers in line with the problem solving index. We have established a total of 30 new tutor constable posts to ensure that our students officers who are coming through in what is very good news, such large numbers, are properly supported and supervised in their early stages of their career, which is so important in the development of officers. In terms of neighbourhood police officers, there is a total of 30 new NPOs which have been created and added to the establishment of 3 districts, Rochdale, Wigan and Bolton. These have been specifically allocated to these particular districts to rebalance a demand anomaly in our ability to deal effectively with incoming incident demand. More work will be undertaken around understanding our demand and the resources we will need to deal with that to influence local policing growth in 2021-22. What this does, in effect, in those districts in particular, is it reduces the neighbourhood beat officer abstraction in order to deal with incident demand. That's a big drain in those districts at the moment. The incident and crime progression growth of 48 posts, this is allocated to enhance our ability to deal with scheduled incidents and crime progression. So incidents that don't require rapid attendance but still need to be properly dealt with and investigated. And in effect, those posts, as well as the 87 that go into the safeguarding units, will both release neighbourhood police officers back to their core frontline role of responding to incidents, because both those teams had individuals working in there but without the established posts, if that makes sense to members. So to summarise, we've allocated the additional officers primarily into local policing, also into some specialist roles that are critical to the job we do, but everything is designed to maximise our local policing capacity, both in terms of problem solving and neighbourhood work via NBOs and PCSOs, but also in terms of our ability to respond to and investigate incidents and ensure that we protect the vulnerable working with partners across GMP. I've probably spoken for too long, Chair, so I apologise. Happy to take any questions.
No, you've certainly not spoken too long. I think it's been a useful background and the information on that. I'll start off with Councillor Pearce from Stockport.
Sorry, it's okay, Chair. My question's been answered.
Thank you, no problem at all. Councillor Williams from Oldham.
Cheers, Nigel, thank you. Nice to hear from you again, ACC Potts. Can you just ask this question though? It's intriguing this when you look back. Yourself and Mike Freeman have been bobbies for years and years and years. So when the training package comes along now for a bobby, a brand new bobby, has it changed over the years? Because society's changed fundamentally the way that people behave. It's absolutely extraordinary how people behave sometimes these days. So when you're training the bobby, as it come on to, no matter what the job is, and they're doing those first 3 months to train as a bobby, how much has it changed, say, compared to 10 years ago or 15 years ago? Thank you.
Okay, that's a good question. It's a very good question. I think, as the Deputy Mayor has alluded to, an increasing amount of the work that police officers do is not just purely crime. So whilst crime has become more complex and the growth of sort of digital media, which is so much a part of crime investigation now, and whilst those changes have taken place, a great deal of our work is focused on vulnerability and safeguarding and dealing with people with mental health issues as well, and repeat demand. So certainly compared, Councillor Freeman can predate me significantly, but in terms of my training was around policing powers, was around crime definition, and was around practical powers such as stop search, and rules around and sort of guidance around stop search does evolve and does change. But I think increasingly the training that officers get is around being able to recognise and understand vulnerability when they see it, being able to work effectively with partners, particularly partners within children's services and adult services within the local authorities, and it's about being better at not just dealing with crime that they attend, but being able to help working with partners achieve better solutions for individuals who are vulnerable within society, because that, as I say, they represent a significant amount of the incidents that we are contacted about, and in the vast majority of those we do not own the solution on our own, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to give Councillor Freeman the quick right to reply. Then I'm going to call Councillor Muslim from Bolton and then Councillor Lancaster from Salford.
I want to agree with ACC Potts that there was no training around basic vulnerability at all when I joined in 1980, and I think that the role and nature of policing today has substantially changed, and the ones that are going out today have my absolute admiration. So, you know, I'm sure that the training they're now receiving addresses the needs and what they need to know. And there's some stuff that was probably trained in the 1980s that, frankly, police officers don't need to know anymore. Thank you, Chair.
There we go. Wasn't saying anything about your age and length of service, Mike. We've done well on that one. Anyway, we will now count Councillor Muslim from Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for providing this report in great detail there, and it's great to see the uplift in officers build on the work as well that the government's doing centrally to bring more officers to our area. My question really was, and it's sort of building on I think the query that Councillor Pearce had in the chat, but I can see that there is a breakdown in the report of officers that are coming to our areas, and it's great to see that you know, Bolton will be getting 31 of those. And using the information provided underneath explaining how those local policing officers are made up of neighbourhood beat and neighbourhood police officers and so on, you can try and work out exactly how many of those 31 will fit into each category. But would it be possible, I imagine you might not have the information to hand at the moment, but would it be possible to actually get a breakdown then specifically of how those 31 are made up of those individual roles that are outlined in the report underneath? Thank you.
Chair, it absolutely will be possible for us to achieve that. Yes, I think the thing I've tried to emphasise during talking through the paper is, whilst we have provided invested additional posts into NBOs on every district and NPOs on the Bolton, Wigan and Rochdale districts, the investment of posts across all districts into safeguarding and incident and crime progression, and to an extent the police tutor officers, will release NPOs back to their posts, if that makes sense. So even the districts that haven't got the uplift of NPOs, the reality is they will have more individuals within those NPO roles as we cascade the recruitment to reflect the total increase in established posts across all those districts. But we can, for Bolton and for any other district, give a sort of a more detailed rundown of exactly what that increase in posts looks like in terms of the different roles. Definitely.
That's great. Thanks for that, Rob. Okay, Councillor Lancaster from Salford.
Just two quick things. First of all, thanks for the report, because it's long overdue. We've been asking for this for some time, so it's good to get this. The question I've really got, though, is PCSOs. I welcome the view that you got 50 new neighbourhood beat officers, but what was the percentage of PCSOs before and what are they now? How do they compare? And the other one, which I've been asked for a number of times about, is the role of specials. What's the distribution of specials in each of the divisions?
Okay, thanks, Councillor Lancaster. I'm unfortunately unable to give you accurate, informed answers to either question here and now. I can do so. We're currently going through a re-establishment process in relation to our special constabulary, and I will be able to get you the numbers broken down by district. Likewise, I'll be able to get you the numbers of PCSOs broken down as well. The reason the paper doesn't have the details, and I've not got those details to hand, is because the paper really was just a reflection on what we've done in relation to the increase in additional police officer posts. So it wasn't deliberate sleight of hand, but I can certainly get the breakdown of PCSOs across the districts and the special constabulary breakdown as well.
I'd also welcome the opportunity to have more details and the breakdown of allocations as you referred to.
asked the question earlier. Absolutely, yeah, we can do that, and we can put that information together. No problem at all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Anybody else want to comment on this? I've just had a message through from Councillor Kevin Anderson from Wigan that he's in the meeting, but he's not got the usual bar up. Now, I'm not sure he's actually in arbiter of the meeting, so if someone could look at that for me, that's just come through on the email. So if somebody could check if Kevin Anderson can be pulled in or not, that would be helpful. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next item then. Thank Rob for the report on there, and we're going to stay with Rob to look at the GMP crime data for 2020 compared to, or the first 6 months of 2020 compared to 2019. Rob.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Again, this is a fairly high-level paper which provides comparative data for the first 6 months of 2020 compared to the first 6 months of 2019. So it's January to June data for this year compared to the same period in 2019, both in terms of crimes recorded, but also in terms of calls received by police, incidents created, and the conversion rate as well, which sort of probably create sort of topic of conversation really based on the interesting 6 months we had in the first 6 months of this year. So the headlines are that total crime for that 6 month period was down 19%. Total recorded crime was down 19%. Mirrored as a percentage is the reduction in victim-based crime. And then on the first page, you've got a breakdown of some of the main crime categories, and you will see robbery was down 28% for that period of time, and then the crime category with the smallest decrease is for domestic abuse, which showed a reduction of 7% in terms of the number of recorded crimes during that period of time. In terms of total crime, the lowest monthly volume of crime was in April this year, and the highest month of crime for the two compared 6 month periods was the period of March in 2019, and significant differences between those 2 months, obviously just over a year apart, and circumstances in England and Wales in April of this year were sort of pretty unique and unprecedented, or it felt like at the time, perhaps not so much now. We've then got a breakdown of the different crime types. We've got some graph data showing the, broadly speaking, the reduction this year compared to last year. And I think probably just in terms of robbery, I think the thing I would say is robbery's been an interesting crime to look at over the 2 years. So in 2019, particularly from about the period of April time, we were responding to the government's serious violence strategy, with some surge funding being received by Greater Manchester. And you will note that in 2019, the robberies recorded reduced significantly from that sort of April period as we started to do the work around violence reduction. Likewise, it's seen a really big reduction from the sort of period of March onwards this year before starting to increase more recently. I think that reflects the fact that robbery, high proportion of our robberies are committed in public spaces, and the reality was the opportunity for criminals to commit those types of crimes was significantly reduced during the lockdown restrictions and the increase in working from home and just generally people not being in public spaces as much. Domestic abuse is far closer to last year, which domestic abuse, it's fair to say, was a concern for Greater Manchester and a national concern around the vulnerability of victims and their potential challenges around reporting domestic abuse, particularly during the lockdown period. It was a concern for us, quite a lot of publicity and work we did on that. So it's probably reassuring to see that the reduction year on year is far less marked than it is for some other crime types. Just very quickly, just in terms of incidents and crime conversion, calls to police pretty much stood still, very close to the previous year. Incidents are reduced because not all calls result in incidents. and then crimes and the conversion rate of crimes dropped. This is, I would suggest, a byproduct of the significant volume of calls that we received that did not relate to crimes but related to COVID breaches or alleged COVID breaches. Really significant numbers that we get. So for the last weekend, you know, we were still talking 500 incidents that were COVID-19 incidents that were reported to Greater Manchester Police. And in terms of police workload, the reduction in crime, albeit crime has started to rise again in recent months, has kind of been more than made up for by the growth in the COVID incidents that have been reported to the police. So it's kind of a change in the I suppose in the breakdown of the nature of the calls we get that has reflected the coronavirus restrictions and the volume of calls that we've received from the public. Again, I've probably spoken a bit too much. I'm very happy to stop there and take any questions that anyone's got on that.
Thanks for that, Rob. That's really helpful. We have been joined by Kevin Anderson, who's a councillor from Wigan, who was on the other side of the virtual wall, so he was in the live meeting rather than here. He does have a question briefly on the 2020 officer uplift, which I'm going to take first, and then we'll go into questions regarding the crime data. To Kevin.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'm sorry for my IT issues earlier on. Just in respect of the police numbers report, obviously I welcome the report and it is a positive step in the right direction. I'm just wondering really how many officers will be retiring, or we anticipate will be retiring over the next 12 to 18 months. So I can get an idea of the net increase, really. The other thing I spotted was obviously the City of Manchester has by far the largest increase in numbers. I presume that just is reflective of the crime data and demands. And finally, we do have some issues in the Lee neighbourhood policing team in terms of PCSO vacancies. So any details on future recruitment would be most welcome.
I'll let you take that briefly, Rob. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. In terms of the police officers who will be retiring, it's interesting that the number retiring, the proportion retiring has significantly reduced over the last 6 months, which is an interesting trend, really. What we've spoken about within this paper are the new posts. So in effect, the establishment of Greater Manchester Police or police officers will continue to rise, and rises, you know, by the amounts within this paper, in addition to the national uplift that we are part of. So our job is to recruit effectively and to train people to fill those posts. So that's the challenge, albeit I think we're doing well in relation to that. But the number of established posts will not be affected by officers retiring. That will affect the strength. But as I say, the challenge for us is to recruit in order to fill those posts. So it's good news long term. And as I say, the proportion of officers retiring and retiring at 30 years service, which is the traditional kind of point that most officers go, is going down at the moment. More officers are staying, which is an interesting trend. In terms of the City of Manchester, we break down Manchester into 3 different districts. So actually the increase in their posts is pretty similar across the other groupings. If you consider them as 3 separate districts, as I said, and you may have heard earlier on, I'm not sure, the districts that have got the biggest increases, Wigan, Bolton and Rochdale, is a reflection of additional NPOs, neighbourhood policing officers, who respond to incidents based on the demand analysis we did for those 3 areas. In terms of Lee PCSOs, I'm afraid I can't give you a quick answer on recruitment in relation to vacancies, but I'm very happy to take it away and recontact you with a sort of an up-to-date position in terms of PCSO recruitment.
And chairing the meeting.
Thank you very much for that update. I look forward to further conversations.
Thanks for that, Kevin.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll go back then to the report, which is the GMP crime data. Is there any comments, questions, observations at all? think by the indication, Rob, you've covered that really well, and I think when you look at the graphs that are in the papers, if people want to look at that, it shows how stark things started to change in March and then have steadied back. And as we said earlier, that the work that GMP and the fire have done on the COVID on top of the normal job, I think it's immense, and I think we certainly want to recognise that. We also need to remember next year when we're looking at the crime data what we're reflecting against as well, because I think we need to be careful of that. Okay, I'm going to move on then. Thanks for that, Rob. We're going to move on to the actions and decisions taken by the Deputy Mayor. Bev, are you commenting on this one?
Thank you, Chair. I don't really think, I think what this gives you is, it gives you an idea of the
that come to me, both in terms of straight purchases and procurement that the police need to make, but also the allocation of funding, some through the police fund, some through my PCC fund, and you'll notice towards the end that we did get some additional money from the Home Office during the COVID period to try and support through the voluntary sector initiatives in communities, and the charts there towards the end give you the details of those allocations, a lot towards domestic abuse victims, but also victims of other crimes and support for early intervention, and generally recognising the situation that we were in. So I'm just happy to take any questions. I hope I can answer them because some of those decisions were a long time ago, but that just gives you the sum total.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think it's always one of those useful information reports where we've got a lot of data there, and if people have got detailed questions, it's probably best to raise them directly, but I am happy to open that up if people have anything. Okay, I'm going to take silences again as golden, and say if people have got anything, if they want to either raise it with myself or direct with the Mayor's office, we're happy to take that. Okay, we're almost going bang on time here, which is unheard of, so maybe virtual world does work. And item 11 is the annual record of complaints recorded, and I'll hand over to Jeanette.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. For members' information and any questions and comments, really, this report comes to you. It's the annual complaints record in respect of the Deputy Mayor and the Mayor in respect of police and crime matters only. Please note that this was in relation to last financial year, so it is just in relation to police and crime matters and not police, fire and crime matters as the panel has responsibility for now. The report identifies to you that both in statute and in our own rules of procedures, we are required to keep a register of any complaints in relation to the Deputy Mayor or the Mayor in relation to police and crime matters, and that we will bring an annual report to this committee in respect of any complaints received. For the last financial year, you can see the report highlights that we received no complaints in respect of the Deputy Mayor or the Mayor in relation to police and crime matters. It does just give you one note that there is a complainant who communicates with me at various times throughout the year, but the established procedure for the police crime panel, as was last year, is for them to complete a form which identifies the nature of the complaint, which identifies the nature of the allegation, basically, and the form hasn't been completed at any point, so we're not taking that complaint forward at the moment. But other than that, nothing in respect of the Deputy Mayor or the Mayor for last financial year. Councillor Murphy, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks. I'm not sure what questions there can be, because I think they only can take questions if there was something in the report, but I think if people do have those complaints, they need to do the official channels, otherwise it doesn't stand. But I think if there is any questions, I'm happy to take them. Again, silence and it is golden again. Well, I think that concludes the meeting of the Greater Manchester Police Crime and Fire Panel. Thank you everyone for bearing with the technology. Some people have been in, been out, in, out. It's, I'm sure we could think of a game we could play with that. So thank you everyone for attending, and I look forward to either seeing you virtually or in person at the next meeting. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Nigel. Thank you.
Rob, are you okay to stay on the line a second, Rob?